Okay, I hope everybody had a chance to take a quick little stretch. I'm having a couple little snacky poos here. Maybe get a drink or freshen up your cup of coffee. You guys are doing awesome. So part of what Joanna and I like to do is we like to use a lot of different tools. After all, we are dynamic distance learning, and we are structured in such a way that we teach our trainees at a distance, and we utilize tools that you can use in your classroom to help promote engagement with your students. And so we're going to use this tool called Nearpod as we talk today about co-teaching lesson planning strategies. And we're going to be talking a lot about learning targets. So if you've had a chance, hopefully, to join the lesson, I see I only have 8 people so far that have joined into the Nearpod. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share that link one more time in the Zoom chat box. This is a very interactive session where you're actually going to be able to practice writing your learning targets within Nearpod. But if you don't click on the link and join Nearpod, you won't be able to participate and do the guided practice. So again, this is where we're asking you for your trust. We're asking you to step out of your comfort zone. If you are using a tool that you've never done before, we are not your average just sit and talk at you type of training. We are very hands-on. So I really want to encourage everybody to click on that link and join in, okay? All right, so I'm going to get started. And as more people turn their cameras back on, Joanna, maybe you can reshare that link in a few minutes if necessary, if somebody else rejoins, okay? All right, so here we are in Nearpod, and as a teacher, I'm the one that forwards through the screens for you. So when we talk about how we are gonna create differentiated lesson plans, we always wanna start with a learning target, okay? So the question I want to ask you is, what do you think a learning target is? You can go ahead and you have 1 minute to type your answer. What do you think a learning target is? Just share your thoughts. Keep in mind here that if your microphone is enabled, you can record an answer instead of typing it, or you can type it in the box. You've got about 15 seconds left to enter your answer. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share out some of the answers that you had. There's Rita's. The end result is what you want the students to learn, understand, and take away. Okay. Dawn says the daily objectives. Let's see, I'll share that. Dawn had the daily objectives, which is good. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Mrs. Yazzie says interactive sharing between the class. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, we have a lot of really interesting answers here. So Vaughn says the end result of what students learn. Okay, you're definitely on the right track. Definitely on the right track. All right, let's move on. So the answer to the question is, what is the learning target? It's basically, where are you going? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want the students to know? But it's more than just an objective, which is what I want the students to know, because a learning target details how you're going to get there. What is the road that you are going to take them down to get to where you are going? So we're going to be focusing on the sequence of learning. When we write a learning target, what are the steps we're going to take to get our students to their goal? Think of it as a trip that we're going to take. And by doing this, by focusing on our sequence of learning, we can start closing some of those learning gaps. We've all heard about the learning gaps, right? And I'm not talking about the gross learning gaps that are a result of the pandemic. We're talking about within the body of a lesson. How do we close the gaps in terms of differentiating so that all our different learners are getting to that target and hitting the mark? So we want to focus on our sequence of learning in our target. So we're going to use evidence of student learning to determine what our next steps in teaching are. We're not just going to write down what we think our steps should be. Every day our plan has to evolve and change based on what the students are showing us. Are they showing us anything? Because if they aren't, we got to deal with that first. We can't just keep teaching. We can't just keep going, right? We have to stop and make sure that everybody is on board. We're going to design our focused instruction, and then we're going to follow it with practice, guided practice. We're going to give our students feedback. We aren't just going to talk at them and then expect them to understand everything while they sit silently behind a camera that's turned off and we don't even know if they're at their device when we're teaching. We're going to give them opportunities to reflect and share on their learning, and we're going to focus on understanding, not just what do you know, but how do you understand this information? Okay? All right. So I'm going to post that for people who have just joined the meeting. I'm sharing that Nearpod link one more time. So if you haven't joined into it, you can go ahead and click on it in the Zoom chat box, and it will bring you right to the screen where we are automatically. Use your Gmail to log in and then join us. Now, this is what we call a collaboration board. It's our big word of the day, right? So the question is, how do your students share their learning in your class? Now, you can either type your answer in that white bar at the bottom of the screen. You can also click on the blue button that looks like a mountain, and you can search for an image. Like maybe your students share their learning in a worksheet, and you want to post a picture of a worksheet. And then you just hit the word post, and your sticky note will go up onto our shared bulletin board. So Dawn says they share their screen with me. That's good. I like it. Now I can heart that. I can like it. Way to be the leader, Dawn, and get the ball rolling. Thank you so much. What are some other ways that your students share their learning in your class? Oh, role playing, okay, and drawing things out. Yes, I have a lot of, as a music teacher, obviously I end up with a lot of very artistic right-brain souls. And so I too have a lot of students that like the performance element. Rita says, my students share by showing using the screen share, verbal group discussions. Cool, I'm guessing maybe you use breakout rooms or chat in the box. Yep. Yep. If we need to individualize, love it. Feel free to go ahead and like somebody's post. Barry responding in the chat box. Oh, shared Google Docs. Awesome, Barry. You're going to be ahead of the game for us when we get to the Google Classroom. They engage in the lecture and respond when I ask questions. Lucky you, because a lot of times I get crickets. I ask a question, crickets, nothing. My students share their learning on the shared screen, or they can draw. Awesome. Students share their learning verbally. The thing is not all students enjoy sharing verbally, right? They're a little nervous about that. Demonstrate specific skills through observation by the teacher. Awesome. Okay. All right, so it's nice because now this is another way that your students can share their learning in your class. You can have a group discussion. It's a little bit like Padlet, only you can, or it's also a little bit like Jamboard, only you can sort of change your backgrounds a little bit and stuff. But this is the same idea. Oh, look at this. Look at Vaughn went and got all like fancy and used a picture sharing with apps. We're going to be talking about that. Creating PowerPoints. I love it, Annette. Private chat box. Jamboard. I love Mrs. Yazzie is using Jamboard. That's a fantastic tool. All right. These are all terrific answers. So if you have just joined the Zoom, Joanna has shared the link for Nearpod. So you want to join in so that you can participate in the activities. All right, we're going to move on to our next screen. So the principles of learning targets, SWOT, stands for students will understand that. So there are two ways you can write a learning target. You can write an I can statement, or you can write a students will understand that. And it really kind of just depends on what your target is. So SWOT stands for students will understand that. You want to make sure that your target is aligned to your external standards. You want to use kid-friendly language. You don't want to make it like a collegiate level textbook. It's not going to fly. Now, when we talk about unpacking, what we mean is that when you put that learning target out there, you don't just say, read it to them. You actually read through it with them and you unpack the elements of it together and you explain what you are doing today to them. So there is no question in their mind about where are we going, how are we going to get there, and what do I, as a student, have to give you or do to be successful? And how do I show you I understand? We unpack all of those things. Unpacking is the most important thing about the learning target, second to writing a good one, okay? You post a learning target in your Zoom at the beginning of class, before you go into Target. The first thing you put up on your Target, before you go into your curriculum and what you're teaching, before you go into your lesson, you are posting that target and you are unpacking it with them, all right? And you're going to want to reference it throughout. Maybe you're going to want to intersperse that target in a couple of different slides or however you're presenting as you go so that you can keep coming back to it at critical points in your lesson. And then you want to assess their progress according to whatever criteria you told them you were going to use. Like if they're going to write something, if they're going to draw something, if they're going to record something, whatever the case may be. All right, so as a school, when we talk about learning targets, we have benchmarks. So if you're just beginning this process and you want to start fostering a culture where all the teachers in the school are going to agree, we're going to try and use learning targets so that all of our students are getting the same thing. We're all using learning targets and it becomes something that is school-wide and the students begin to assimilate to this structure. Teachers are going to have to practice writing learning targets for their daily lessons. You're going to have to be willing to do that. You're going to want those targets to be posted into your classroom, okay? You can't write them and then not have them visible. And in your virtual classroom, you might need to get creative with how you do that. Another great way would be to post it in your Google Classroom. You're going to have to get used to unpacking a target. I think sometimes it gets very easy for us as teachers to make assumptions because we are experts in our content. This happens to me all the time. I'm teaching my students how to play piano right now. I've been playing piano my entire life. And it never ceases to amaze me how much I assume because it is just a way of thinking and a way of life for me. When I talk about, I'll say something like, okay, move up the piano. And half of them look at me and have no idea what I'm talking about. Because for me, I understand that moving up the piano means taking my right hand and pressing the keys from left to right because the notes are getting higher and higher in pitch. But I've made a tremendous number of assumptions by saying, okay, move up the piano. For some of them, it's Greek, okay? So I have to identify key vocabulary. I have to identify criteria. I have to unpack. I cannot make assumptions from my viewpoint as an expert. Think about when you were first learning a concept. What questions did you have? Never assume that they know anything. Co-planning. You need to write these targets together so that all of your students can meet these targets. And you need to talk about how you're going to differentiate them, which we'll get to in a few minutes. All right. Then, as co-teachers, after we've written these, we need to make sure that all of our students are going to be able to articulate what they're learning. If I go into your classroom and you're 20 minutes into a 40-minute class, I should be able to ask any one of your students, what are you learning today? And they should be able to tell me. How are you showing your teacher that you understand? They should be able to tell me. Every student. Then the great thing is that your families are going to have more information about what your children are learning because you can share these with the families so that they can then start interacting with the students and asking them questions about what they're learning. And we're going to get to that a little bit later on too. We'll circle back there. So benchmarks are important. All right, so what are the qualities of an effective learning target? All right, there are three. The first is that the learning target focuses on meaning making. In other words, it's asking students to make inferences or to draw conclusions. It's asking them to analyze, to compare, to do some kind of deeper level thinking. If you don't have a meaning-making component in your learning target, you need to make sure that you have one, okay? Can they infer something? Can they interpret something? Can they summarize? Can they justify? These are sort of like your verb elements of what your students are going to be able to do. How are they going to use that knowledge and in a new way? All right. The next thing is acquisition. There has to be an acquisition element in your target. In other words, they can define something. They can identify it. They can memorize it. It's the simple recollection of facts. Like, how are they getting the information when you're giving them the new information? Like, students will listen to an audio recording. That's how they're going to acquire it. Or students will watch a video. That's the acquisition, right? And then they will do something else with it. So they're going to acquire it by doing this, and then they're going to make some meaning of it by the activity that we're engaging in. So it's sort of like direct instruction and guided practice. Think of it that way. Then finally, the best, the transfer, right? Once they have this information and they have practiced it, how can they use it and apply this knowledge? Either in a new context, can they adapt it? Can they create something? In my world, with musicians? Can they compose something? Can they create a maybe a variation of something? How do they design something or build something? Can they use, if you're in mathematics, let's say, can they use a formula for a different purpose? Or can they think of how it could be applied in a different context? This is the transfer, okay? So all three of these elements need to be included. So what I want you to do right now is play this little game. What are the qualities of an effective learning target? So you're going to match the quality to the definition. It's like those old card matching games that you used to play when you were little. So what does meaning making mean? What does acquisition mean? And what does transfer mean? Rooney, 3 out of 4. Way to go. You can give it another go. You can try it more than once. You definitely can try it more than once. Well, I see a lot of people who aren't being brave. Remember what we talked about. Engage. Try to be brave. Participate. This is what we want our students to do, right? How can we ask them to do something that we are not ourselves willing to do? Oh, Rooney, 4 out of 4. Way to go on the second try. Perfect score. All right, Rita, 3 out of 4. Not bad, not bad. Geneva, 4 out of 4. Awesome job. Dawn, also an overachiever, 4 out of 4. All right, now I'm starting to see some answers coming in. You got this, guys. You could do this. Can you tell I'm a visual thinker? I like my pictures, don't I? Come on, Miss Joanna, 2 out of 4. What are you doing there, Joe?
I just finished.
Okay. Oh, now she got 4 out of 4. Way to go. Way to go. Barry, I don't see any tries. Come on, Stella. Come on, Rennie. Richard, I don't see any tries.
I can't, how do you, I mean, my laptop is frozen. I can't move things around.
Oh, that stinks. You can't play the game. That stinks.
I'm trying to figure out what it is you wanted. This is Annette.
Oh, okay, Annette. So what you're doing is you're looking at the pairs and you're going to match the picture to the definition.
Oh, okay.
So what, for example, when it says meaning making, that means analyzing, right?
Okay.
Like
Okay.
I'm making meaning because I'm identifying the cause of a problem. So I would match that. Okay. Got it?
All right. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Good. Yep. Good.
And Jody, on my screen, it had just 4 squares until I clicked on one. Then the other 4 squares to match came up. So maybe if you just click on one square, it'll show you the other 4 that you can start matching.
Oh, okay. Good point, Joe. Thanks for sharing.
I just played around with it. Yeah, I went. So don't be afraid. Just go in there and do it.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? The whole purpose of this is to, and guess what? If you're experiencing frustration or fear, welcome to the world of your students every day of their lives. This is what it feels like to be a student in our classes sometimes. And isn't it good that we can understand what they must feel like on a daily basis when we're throwing things at them? And, and we can't understand why they don't get it, right? But so we dive in and we try, and of course they're probably going to be way better with the technology than we are, right? But it gives us a sense of, gee, walking in their shoes for a minute. When is the last time you walked in the student's shoes, right? So, all right, we're going to keep going because we have more to do. So the good, the meh, and the ugly. An ugly learning target. Here's an example of what we don't want to do. Something that's sort of like it's okay learning target, and then an example of a really good one. So an ugly one is, I can understand covalent bonds. Well, it's way too subjective. There's nothing in there that allows the teacher to say how they're even going to measure understanding. There's no meaning-making activity in there. There's no acquisition in there. How are they going to understand covalent bonds? What task are they going to do? It's not there, right? Now, a meh would be SWOT plants use photosynthesis to create oxygen. Remember, SWOT stands for students will understand that plants use photosynthesis to create oxygen. Well, that's all well and good because that's just a regurgitation of information. It's not specific enough. So it doesn't really tell you how they use the information to demonstrate their understanding, nor does it show a higher level of thinking. I mean, a student can say, yeah, plants use photosynthesis to create oxygen, but they can't explain to you anything about photosynthesis, why they need to create oxygen, how did they learn that a plant creates oxygen through photosynthesis, what's the process, what's the higher level of thinking, how does photosynthesis impact global warming? I mean, there's all kinds of higher level thinking that's not being addressed there. Now, a good one would be something like, I can create a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so there's their meaning-making activity. They're going to create a presentation. They're going to make meaning by creating a presentation to compare and contrast P and S waves caused by seismic activity. All right, which incorporates graphs from the textbook. There's their acquisition. They're going to use their textbook and they're going to look at those graphs and do the textbook reading. That's how they're going to acquire the knowledge. And then they're going to make meaning of it by creating a presentation and then sharing that presentation with you, okay? So it demonstrates exactly what they're going to learn, how they're going to use it to create a product. So we're focusing on concepts and skills, most likely from our state standard for science in this case, and a measurable objective. I can measure a presentation. I can measure if they have selected the proper graphs that align with the different types of P and S waves. I can grade that. I can measure that. And it's student-friendly language, and it's driving your instruction, and it's driving your assessment. Okay? So, all right. So we're about to write our own learning targets. But before we do that, I want you to do this fill-in-the-blank activity because the answers that are down at the bottom of your screen that you drag and drop into the blanks, these are the key words of a learning target. For example, write. Write is meaning making, right? Right? It's a verb. Paragraph. That's how they're going to demonstrate their understanding. Explaining. That's another verb. What are they going to do to make meaning for themselves and transfer it? What's the topic that they're learning about? The effects of global warming. Then how are they going to acquire it? They're going to use vocabulary words from a worksheet. So obviously acquisition is they're using the worksheet. They're going to incorporate the vocabulary. That's a measurable, accessible outcome. And they're going to do this by writing a paragraph. And their task is to explain the negative effects of global warming. I've covered all my bases. So the purpose of this activity is to get you thinking about what are the key words in my target? Verbs and nouns, right? What are they going to do? And how are they going to do it? And what am I going to use to measure it? So let's see how you did with drag and drop. Okay, Barry got 6 out of 6. Good job. So did Dawn. Awesome. Robert got 6 out of 6. Vaughn got 6 out of 6. Rennie, all right, great. Great job, you guys. I'm seeing a lot of 6 out of 6s on my screen. Okay. So I'm trying to scaffold you up towards this next slide, which is writing your own learning target. Okay. And we're going to have a pretty good chunk of time in which to do this. So what you're going to do is we're going to use this collaborative board, and we're going to have probably 10 minutes-ish, give or take. So we're going to be looking at trying to have a target written by about 11, okay? So in your target, you're going to write it down, and everyone's going to be able to take a look at it so that we can actually talk about them and see what's working and what's not working. So you want to think about something that's relevant to your content area. All right, what do I want my students to do? So you could say SWUT. You could start with students will understand that. Or you could start with an I can statement. Okay, I can write a 4-measure melody. Okay, so that's what I want my students to do. Using Quaver, which is a music tool, and play it for the class with 90% accuracy. So here's an example of a learning target that I just did. What are they going to do? They're going to write a 4-measure melody. How are they going to demonstrate their understanding? They're going to use Quaver, and after they write it, they're going to play it for me. So I'm going to be able to tell, did you just throw notes on the page, or do you actually understand what you just wrote? Do you know how to play what you wrote? Because anyone can throw notes on a page, right? And then what's the criteria? I want them to be able to play that song with 90% accuracy. In other words, I only want there to be 1 or 2 mistakes, and that will show that they have learned what I wanted them to do. So now it's your turn. So that's my example. Now what I want you to do is I want you to take your content area and use mine as a guide, and now insert information from your curriculum. I can solve, I can record, I can what? What kind of activities do your students do? Or what do you want your students to understand? So take some time. You know what? Throw some stuff up there on the board. And we can talk about whether it works. I can give you feedback, okay? Just give it a shot. Throw something up there onto the chalkboard, and we'll see how we can make it better. Just try it. This is your guided practice time. How would you write a target for your students? Oh, Rita! Oh my gosh! That's fantastic! Check out Rita's, you guys. Oh my gosh, first try. Rita, I'm blown away. Let's see, Shayna. I can write a 5-sentence summary paragraph using 5 key vocabulary words from today's sentence, or from today's. Okay, so Shayna, what do you want them to summarize? I can write a 5-sentence paragraph summarizing something using 5 key vocabulary words. Can you change that so that you can include what you want them to summarize? Because that's your target, right? A summary paragraph could be about anything, so you want to be specific. What are they summarizing? Try changing that, Shayna. But that's a really good start. So Rita had said,
okay, how do I change it?
You can just throw another one up there, or you can trash it and throw another one up there. You can't edit what you put up, but you can either trash it or just do another one. Okay, either way. Okay, Robert, I can identify and describe the basics of a fillet weld symbol using welding inspection skills. Okay, Robert, I like where you're starting too. Can you be more specific with the basics? Because then your students might, like, I don't know how many basics there are, but maybe you could try and be more specific. I can identify and describe something like what a utilization of a fillet weld symbol by applying welding inspection skills, perhaps. Okay, Dawn, students will be able to graph a quadratic function in the form with 100% accuracy after group learning and individual. Be able to graph a quadratic function. Dawn, I love it. What I might do to make it really stellar, I would say students will be able to graph a quadratic function in the form, whatever, with 100% accuracy, utilizing knowledge from the group learning and guided practice. Like after, what you want to do is you want to say to them, why is the group learning important? They want to utilize what they learned in the group learning. So maybe change it to utilize instead of just after. And that's meaning making, right? Utilizing what was learned during group and individual practice. Students will understand the world is full of political ideas by listing 3 major ideas with pictures of each. Okay, Vaughn, I like the visual because that's differentiated, right? You're allowing them to use pictures. So what I would say would be, maybe whittle it down to 1 major idea, because 3 major ideas is a little bit broad for 1 class period, and make it a little bit more right-sized for 1 class period. And maybe then you could use the same target over 3 class periods, and each class period you could do 1 idea. And maybe students could identify one of the political major ideas that they relate to, because then that's meaning making. And include a picture, and then maybe with a caption under the picture, because then they can't just throw any picture up there, but maybe you want them to include a caption. So you want to be a little more specific. Okay, Lolita, I will determine an author's point of view or purpose in a text in which others analyzing how style and content contribute. Analyzing. Wow, Lolita, that's a nice one. I will determine an author's point of view in a text that utilizes effective rhetoric. Make it more direct. That utilizes effective rhetoric. Like particularly is opinion, right? You want something concrete that utilizes effective rhetoric and analyze how the style and content contribute to that effectiveness. And I don't know what you mean by 3 out of 5 trials. Like, these are awesome. Joanna, just so you know, I'm not going to do time to climb, okay? I want to focus on this. This is more valuable.
I agree.
So I'm going to use the time to climb time with the differentiation on the target. Okay. So I'm making an adjustment. Okay. We can always do time to climb in another time. Okay. So Barry, so Joe, please feel free to give feedback on these because there's a lot and I can't do that all myself. Students can use the compound interest formula to compare the effect of, and you guys, you can also feel free to give feedback on each other's. Students can use the compound interest formula to compare the effect of annual interest rates on the future value of an investment by using. Okay, can you be more specific, Barry? Don't say using an online graphing tool. Are you teaching them a specific graphing tool? Because if you are, you should say by using the online graphing tool such and such, right? Be specific.
Gotcha.
So a feature of investment by using an on-graph tool. Students, and a table and a spreadsheet and prepare to share Google Docs with graphics. Okay. So I'm thinking on yours, Barry, for a second here. Oh my God, until a table.
We use spreadsheets sometimes to show.
Right. I think it's just, I think it's a little wordy and the kids might get caught up in all. I'm just wondering how I can make it a little bit more concise so that it doesn't seem so overwhelming. So maybe you could, what online graphing tool do you use?
We usually use Desmos.
Okay, so say.
We also use GeoGebra computer algebraic system because that will create a table as well. So we could just cut it down to that.
Okay, so maybe you could say by using Desmos online graphing tool. and share it.
If
Because
I
like,
eliminate decimals and just use the GeoGebra cast, it can do the table as well as the graph, and then that will.
right, because then there's stuff in there that you can get out, like remove and make it more concise. Because if it's too long, the kids are going to get lost in it. You know what I mean? So you want it to be streamlined, and what we call the language is right-sized. Okay, we definitely want it to be right-sized.
I guess I forgot that I was writing this for the student.
Yep, yep,
Jody?
and that's a good reflection. Yes.
Jody?
Yes?
So maybe he could say, Barry could say, students can use the compound, students will learn to use the compound interest formulas to compare the effects of annual interest rates at maybe 80% accuracy, and then finish the rest with something like using
I'm not quite sure what comparing
using the
interest
future
rates at
value.
80% accuracy means, though. That's why I
But
didn't
that-
throw in a percent
if-
accuracy, because
If you take 100, you know.
yeah,
you
I know
want
what
them to learn it
80%
all
means,
in
but
one
how do you
time, but
compare two rates at 80%
Because
accuracy?
you
Okay,
have to
so
look-
let's
Give
say
them 5 problems, they can do it 4 out of 5 times.
correct, correct.
Yeah, I
correct,
get
correct.
that,
Would be
but
a percentage right there.
yeah, I get that, but it's, to me,
Well,
it's,
maybe students will learn to use the compound interest formulas to compare the effects of annual interest rates.
I think you're missing my
with
point.
With 3 out of 4 trials.
Mhm.
And then finish it off with students will use, students will calculate the future value of the investment by using an online graphing tool, 1, and then 2, use a table and a spreadsheet and preparing a shared Google document. I don't know, you kind of have to break it up.
This sounds like something that would be great for you guys to collaborate on together. Obviously, you're both math teachers, but I wanted to draw my attention to Annette for a second, because she said I can calculate my THR after running 0.5 miles by taking my pulse for 10 seconds and multiplying that number by 6. Where is the meaning making? Why do the students need to be able to do that? That's what I want you to incorporate in there, Annette. Why does it matter that they need to be able to calculate their heart rate like that?
Right. Okay.
Okay, so can you incorporate some meaning making?
Yes.
Awesome. So Stella is obviously a foreign language teacher. I can write 5 simple sentences. What does simple mean? Right, Stella, that's ambiguous. I can write just 5, maybe short instead of simple, because short is more definable. I can write 5 short sentences using the conjugated verb to be in Navajo with a certain level of accuracy. Like, how many mistakes are they going to be able to make and still have it be passable? All right. So Bessie's, let's see here. Bessie, I can read the first scene and act assigned role of Romeo and Juliet play with it. Okay. So, all right. So when you say I can read, what does that mean? Like, what do you want them to know about the first scene? I mean, there's the first scene and there's the first act. And which role, Bessie, are you, like, I need more detail in there. So let's make it smaller. I can read the first scene of Romeo and Juliet. And then what do you want them to be able to do after they read the first scene of Romeo and Juliet? What do you want them to be able to tell you or understand? Because I don't see what you want them to know there. Okay. Okay, Robert, I will understand. Understand is pretty hard to measure. So can we be more specific, or just say, maybe students will understand that the math skill of such and such relates to welding. Like, I need more information there. Okay, I could say to you, I could meet your target by saying math skills relate to welding, Mr. Black Hat. I understand that. But what have they demonstrated that they actually learned? They need to understand that they can apply a specific skill and how it specifically relates to welding. And how are they going to demonstrate that they understand that? How are they going to show you that they understand that? Okay? So I need more detail there. That's much better, Barry. All right, Mrs. Yazzie. So what I would say, Mrs. Yazzie, is I would say I can define the 4 types of communication and write an example, not with along with, right? You're not going to define the example. You want them to be able to write an example of how each style is portrayed in 4 short paragraphs. Like, you want to say 1 paragraph per style, right? So I can define the 4 types of communication by writing an example of each using 4 short paragraphs, perhaps, something like that. Students will identify the offspring of 2 parental genotypes using Punnett square. Okay, is Punnett square a tool? Rennie, is Punnett square a tool?
Yeah, it's a graphic.
It's a
representation, yes.
Okay, students will identify offspring. Are they identifying, or do they have to figure it out by using the graph?
They have to identify. I mean,
Like, are they determining what the offspring would be based on reading the graph? Do they have to, like, compare and contrast or something, or match?
The phenotype will be given and they have to identify the genotype.
Okay, so students will identify the genotype of 2 parental students. So really what they have to do, the skill they're learning is how to identify a genotype, right?
Right.
So that they can determine what the offspring would look like. So I think you need to reorder it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, yeah.
And Mrs. Yazzie, what I would say is when you say the 4 types, the 4 communication styles of, and then I would label each style in your learning target, because you want to guide them towards success, right? You want to guide them towards success. I can define the 4 communication styles of this, and this by writing an example of each using 4 short paragraphs, or creating. You're not using, you're actually creating 4 short paragraphs. And creation, there's your transfer, right? There's your meaning making, using the
Okay.
word create, okay?
All right.
But yeah, add in your communication styles.
But what if I wanted them to define those, to know those for?
Well, what you want them to do, if they're going to write an example, I actually feel like it's defining communication styles and then writing examples of them is actually two different targets. Okay, because defining something is being able to say what they are and what it means. Whereas I think when you're talking about writing 4 short paragraphs, you want them to write a paragraph in a communication style, right? Those are really 2 separate skills. You want one skill is they are going to apply a communication skill in a paragraph. And the other skill is they know what the communication styles are and how they're defined. So I think you're trying to blend 2 very different skills into the same learning target. And I think it's too much. So I think you either need to simplify the definition or you need to say, understanding the 4 different types of communication styles, I can write an example of each in their own paragraph.
That's
Does
kind of
that
how I
make
wrote it
sense?
before. Yeah, that's how I had it before, but I just wrote it like how you said it. So before I can define the 4
You can
types
define
of
4 types of communication
I forgot the word style.
accurately with an
Along with
example how,
example.
right, but you're still, but yeah, you reword it, but the point is that you still have 2 learning targets embedded in one. One of them is defining the 4 types of communication accurately. And the other is writing in each of those 4 communication styles. Writing a paragraph isn't showing a definition. Writing a paragraph is a transfer of knowledge. You're asking them to acquire something and show it. So I think there's 2 targets there. I would make it 2 separate things. So instead of like, I don't think you would want them to write 4 short paragraphs until you were certain that they understood the definition of communication. I don't think those goals should be all in the same class. That I think it's too much is what I'm suggesting. I get what you want them to do, but I think you need to split it.
Very good.
Just
Or
my
maybe-
opinion.
Or
So,
maybe list the 4 types with an example.
yeah, you could definitely do that. You want to remember that what we think of as manageable is because we are experts in our field. You are an English teacher. You studied English. You teach English. Your kids are 15 and 16 years old. Can they really manage all of that in a 40-minute class? I don't know how long your class periods are, but
Hour and
Right.
90 minutes.
90
oh,
minutes.
you're at 90 minutes. Okay, so maybe you have more than one target. So you can have 2 learning targets in 90 minutes, and I would separate them. But I would make sure that you were certain the learning of the definitions had happened. And then I would say, okay, now we're moving on to our second target. And then I would split it into 2. If you have a 90-minute block, definitely you can have 2 targets, but make them separate. And that's a very good point, Vaughn, is that if you have 90-minute blocks, you probably can have 2 targets in a 90-minute block that are scaffolded.
Yes, and then usually you might have skipped the sequence, but they might be in sequence. They might have already been taught those. So
Oh, Annette, that is so much better. Annette, that's way better.
Okay,
Because
thank you.
now you're telling them why it matters. Because if they're
Right.
not in their target heart rate, that's why it matters, right? So I can
Right.
assess my well-being. That and that's meaning making. That's what makes it relevant to them. Okay. All right. So guys,
Thank you.
what we're going to do now is we are going to go into, I definitely, Vaughn, I think that maybe for our coaching, we're not going to get to how we differentiate a target right now because I thought it was more important to really get into the heart of this. So maybe that'll be something that we can do in the coaching is go back to learning targets and talk about how we differentiate them and what elements we change in a learning target so that we are following inclusionary practices. So that might be one topic. And Joe, if you could write that down for me. All right. But what I want to do now is we do have one more thing that we want to get to before we get into lunch. And I want to just shift gears with you because I think this is a tool that that you're really going to find useful. And it relates to how we collaborate with each other and how we share these learning targets. And this banter that we had back and forth between the two math teachers, the tool I'm about to show you would be a place
Rita's not
where
a
you
math
could.
teacher.
Oh, not? Okay.
No.
Well, anyway, that banter that we had between those two teachers, this would be a place where you could go back and forth on that virtually with a colleague and muddle through some of those things and work together and collaborate with each other. So we're going to close out of Nearpod right now. Okay. And keeping in mind that we can always go back. We have 2 coaching sessions in addition to